thousands of Brazilians are lured into the Amazon, where they're forced to cut and burn the rainforest. They're slaves. It's big business, and it's deadly.
The guy in the yellow shirt with the handcuffs, who was one of the armed guards, has just confessed to being a killer.
Every year, some 50,000 slaves turn an area of the Amazon the size of Switzerland into a wasteland. It's been more than a century since Brazil abolished slavery, officially.
Years ago, everything below me would have been virgin rainforest. That's all gone now in the name of plantations and pasture for beef.
Here, where farms are the size of an English county, the landowners are the law.
This region of northern Brazil in Amazonia is the absolute heart of the slave trade. It's also got a terrible reputation for murder and extortion. Here in the local paper, there are examples of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 local murders by gangsters.
And it's often difficult to tell the gangsters from the gattos, the foremen hired to control labourers. Valdir is in hiding from a gatto who shot him after he worked for 5 months and asked to be paid.
But that did it go through you? God, I mean, that's just by your heart.
It's pertinho do coração aí. The bullet is still inside. You can see the bullet.
Tá aqui
right
a
there.
bala, tá dentro.
The bullet is inside.
Oh my God, I can feel it. What kind of gun was that?
Que tipo de arma foi isso?
And they shot you in the leg? With a pistol or a rifle?
Que tipo de...
38.
38.
38 pistol.
Yeah, pistol.
Para mim era 1578, porque morreu era 1900.
The moment he opened the door, the gatto shot him in the chest. He fell over and he shot him in the leg again. He then went into the room next door and shot 3 times into the sleeping body of his friend, who was killed instantly. And he only survived by pretending to be dead. It's been 3 months since Valdir was shot, and he doesn't seem to think that much can be done. He's gone to the police, but he's got no faith in them or the judicial system.
But the judicial system itself is under pressure. 2 hours south, in a town called Redemption, one young woman judge lives under siege. Redemption is best known as Brazil's capital of the pistolero, the hired gun. The judge lives in the courthouse, behind a security fence and armed guards.
Judge Leia Sarmento stands in judgment on labour disputes. And the main labour dispute around here are complaints against landowners for either not paying wages or for slavery.
In the 7 months she's been here, she's attracted bitter hostility.
No meu gabinete, né?
Your chambers.
Your chambers.
Step into my chambers, young man. So those are all your cases, are they?
Sim.
How many cases have you had since you started?
1,248 cases.
Of these, 110 concern allegations of slavery, but she's convinced there should be more.
She also has a very strong conviction that the number of cases here, astronomical though they are, don't reflect the real scale of the problem, because a huge number of people, she thinks, are not even making it to the labour court because they're afraid for their lives.
The judge herself has been threatened.
Are they phone calls? Are they letters?
Como é que são as ameaças? São telefonemas?
Não,
São
na
cartas?
verdade, eu recebi uma ameaça.
She said that some of the threats have been delivered in person at the front desk of her own courthouse.
Came to your judge's chambers and said, you should be careful with your obsession with the law because there was a judge killed in São Félix, which is part of your area of operations.
Sim, e ele, no caso, ele não disse isso para mim diretamente, ele disse para funcionário e para o outro que foi ameaçado também.
She says there's basically a culture of impunity. They're very rich, very powerful people here who expect to be able to buy anybody, she says. And that she's been accused as a judge of being obsessed with the law.
Anti-slavery campaigner Dorothy Stang, an American nun, was murdered in February. I set off to meet her close friend, Father Henri de Rosier. Jinguara is a magnet for penniless workers and the ghettos who exploit them. Because of his campaigns against slavery, there's a 100,000 real price on his head.
Father Henry's showing me around the area of Jinguara where the workers come. They're frequently put up in tiny little shack-like hotels where they run up bills that they can't pay. The ghettos then come in, pay the bills, and from that point on, he owns them. Nous cherchons les travailleurs. Oui. Les gens qui...
Brazil has laws to protect workers, but they count for little in the Amazon, where the law flows from the barrel of a gun.
Last beer for you, sir. Have you been ripped off before?
Já.
Rui da Costa is 33. He's penniless and a former slave.
Twice. I've only been here about 2 minutes. He's literally the first person that I've sat down and asked a very simple question. Have you been ripped off before? And he says, oh yeah, twice. 3 or 4 months' work completely for nothing. Just, yeah, the scale of this problem is extraordinary.
Father Henri's been helping to free slaves for decades. Back at his office, he showed me a Labour Ministry name and shame list of people convicted of slavery.
What we've got here is a list of convictions for slavery over the last couple of years. I'm going to go through it and see how many are in an area around here where I'm staying at Jinguara.
There are 165 names on this list. It reads like a Brazilian who's who.
Inocência Gomes de Oliveira, from the Fazenda Caraibas, convicted of having 56 slaves in November 2003. At the time, he was president of Brazil's National Congress, and he's still a congressman. What do you have to do in this country to get barred from Congress? That's 130 kilometers. So, just in this area here, from Jinhua, which is where my finger is, like that, 35 convictions for slavery. And on average, I'm guessing, but on average, there are about 50 slaves per conviction.
Brazil's left-wing president, Luiz Lula da Silva, wants to end slavery by the end of this year. His plans to confiscate land from convicted slavers are being blocked by landowners in the Congress.
There we go.
I wanted to know, if they didn't find slavery immoral, wasn't it faintly embarrassing?
Brothers Quagliato. Fernando Luis was convicted November 2003, just over a year ago. 167 slaves on this farm. This is a farm so big that it's actually subdivided into smaller farms, which are named, I don't think with a great deal of irony, after American states.
It's easy to keep prying eyes away from farms this big. The nearest public road is 100 miles away, and workers struggle to leave without permission.
Yeah. Well, top tips for ranchers with guilty consciences. If you want to keep us away, lock your gate.
One major landowner wasn't too shy to show me round his farm.
Luciano Guedes has invited us out to his farm. He's the regional leader of the big landowners association and actually also the vice president of the same organisation for the whole state. He's publicly admitted that there's a problem with the perception that landowners are slavers. Bon dia! Oh, very smart, they got their farm uniform on.
Pontualidade britânica. Como é que é a tradução de pontualidade britânica? Bom dia.
Luciano is the second generation of his family to farm this land. His clan carved 3 farms out of the rainforest. Brazil's been ruled by civilians for 20 years, but its far-right legacy has survived the passing of the generals. Today, conservatives see allegations of slavery as part of a left-wing conspiracy to drive them off the land.
Talvez eu não tenha sido compreendido que eu tenha feito essa afirmação. Talvez eu tenha sido mal compreendido, né? Ao contrário do que muitos dizem.
Luciano is saying there's no such thing as slavery in this country, not in the sense of people being forced to work against their will. What he's saying is that there's a number of minor violations of Brazil's labour laws, but the accusation of slavery is coming directly from commercial interests, he says, who are trying to hold back Brazil's development.
He said these were state-subsidised European farmers. But if there's no slavery, why was Leia, the judge, being threatened?
Luciano is saying that the threats against the judge have no basis in reality. They're being invented by these commercial interests that seem to want to prevent this region of Pará in Brazil from developing properly.
Perhaps Luciano had a point. So I got in touch with the Catholic Church's Pastoral Land Commission. It works closely with alleged slaves. Dava had a tip-off while we were with her and agreed to take me to meet some men who'd escaped from a charcoal kiln.
How long did you work there? And did you get paid at all in that time? They were owed between 6 and 7 months' pay. They're afraid to go back there and demand their money because they say the owner and his sons are all armed with 38 special revolvers.
Every year, huge tracts of the rainforest are illegally felled, burned, and turned into charcoal for smelting iron for export to America. These men said they'd been slaves at a kiln, that there was a young mother there being held, that she was starving. There was no sign of the starving mother.
So she's the daughter of the owner.
Is the owner here, or is his son? Do they have a cell phone, or we need to be able to talk to them?
Brazil's rainforests are disappearing into kilns, and the conditions for the workers are medieval.
It was a burnt.
There was a burn from what? From the doorway?
Yeah.
So you're coming into doorways that are so hot they burn you?
They had to squat down to get in.
Oh, what? This was full of charcoal. So you basically had to mine hot charcoal.
Yeah.
These men were forced to come into these kilns and burrow in, and as if mining coal, they would be mining hot charcoal.
It's a tough life, but was it slavery? Dava had discovered that the workers had denounced their boss as a slave driver because he refused to pay them in advance. What Luciano, the landowner, had said rang true. Workers were abusing labour laws to settle grudges.
No caso de acidente, né? Quem é que presta socorro eles?
But human rights groups and the United Nations estimate that 50,000 Brazilians are enslaved every year. 3 days before I was due to leave, I got a call from the Labour Ministry. Its agents were planning to raid farms and free slaves. Six small teams of police and labour lawyers are all Brazil has to combat slavery.
The police and the people from the Labour Ministry, they've come to a remote town right on the edge of the Amazonian jungle where they've got reports of a very bad case of slavery.
Escaped slaves slip past armed guards and travel huge distances to contact the authorities.
This is Geraldo. He recently escaped from a farm deep in the forest. In fact, he says there are 50 workers there being held against their will. They were taken there by Gato under cover of darkness. There were 3 armed men standing around them.
It's a ripping escape yarn. Geraldo says he hid from jaguars up trees, and Paulo Cesar, the team leader, takes some convincing. But in the end, the team is won over, and the raid is on. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, and the team, including the federal police, are now planning to go into the farm that's some 300 kilometres somewhere in the jungle to perform a rescue. The main problem now is going to be to actually find the farm where they're being forced to work. It's a long, hard drive back over the route the informer took in the dead of night. After several hours, the element of surprise begins to slip. We're lost and have to stop for directions. Some confusion as to where the bad guys are. This informant, do you trust him?
A história dele é verdadeira.
His story is true.
Is there armed men and illnesses?
Tem gente armada, gente doente.
3 pessoas armadas. Mas vamos
We cannot talk too much close to this guy.
Reluctant to talk too much in front of a civilian witness, but Paolo's saying that there's 3 armed guys on the farm. Conditions are appalling. People haven't been paid. There's about 50 people there. There's illness. The living conditions, the sanitation is non-existent. As we approached the farm, where the slaves were allegedly held, the informer's warnings about pistoleros meant the police broke out their weapons. We inched forward through a wasteland of charred forest and quickly came upon a slave camp. Illegal weapon, shotgun number 1. One of the ways that they managed to prosecute the slavers is by capturing them with illegal weapons, which is an offence that they can be arrested for, and that's frequently, they tell me, the best way of getting a prosecution because it has the severest sentence. What's this piece, PC? What is this shop?
Shop.
This is the shop where they store the...
How does it work?
Aqui, claro, aqui, ó. Ele pagou lá no hotel do Milton 258 para tirar o Manuel da Raça.
They have to get all their food and other equipment, everything, from this little cantina, this little shop. Everything they buy is entered into one of these exercise books, and they stack up debt that they're totally unable to pay, and therefore can never leave the farm because they're actually in debt to the owners and to the gutter who's running it. We find about 15 men here. They're all in debt to the cantina. Jose says that he's been here for 3 months. He hasn't been paid. He's running up a debt here in the cantina, and he says he's just going to trust them to write down the right amount. He doesn't even know how big his debt is. Can I ask you very politely if you can read and write?
No. No, he's illiterate.
Só assim meu nome.
So you don't know what they're writing down in that book, do you?
O senhor não sabe o que ele está escrevendo no livro, então?
Não.
No, he has no idea.
Well, I hope you get everything that's coming to you. We came across a young boy and his grandmother who were also trapped on the farm.
And who else sleeps in here?
Quem mais dorme aqui?
Okay. He doesn't believe nobody can speak Portuguese. Tell me, do you work here?
Você trabalha aqui?
Trabalho.
Do you know how old you are?
Você sabe a sua idade? Quanto você tem?
7.
This is Andreson. He is a slave. He's 7. He does here what the adults do, and if he doesn't work, he doesn't eat.
More slave camps were said to be hidden in the bush, and as the search continued, our informer suddenly spotted some pistoleros. The man in the yellow shirt has been identified by our informer as one of the armed men who were holding the slaves on a farm.
Anda com o Paraíba, né?
É.
O Paraíba que contrata você ou você que contrata o Paraíba? Como é que é esse nome aí?
Contato como assim?
They quickly admitted that they had been the slave guards and more.
Bem antes.
Jesus. The guy in the yellow shirt is now, who was one of the armed guards who's been arrested, has just told the federal police that 8 months ago he killed a woman. Just confessed, just like that.
He told the police he was wanted in Belém, the state capital, for murdering his wife.
These guys turn out to be the gatos, the subcontractors who are in charge of the workers or the alleged slaves on the farm. They've all been detained.
But these men are the small fry. PC and his raiding party are after the boss, and they track down the farm manager to his hideout.
Beleza, né? Foi você que contratou o Paraíba.
Foi.
E o seu Isaac, como é que eu falo com ele?
É por telefone, se eu consigo.
91-214-7106.
Aí ele fez uma derrubada aí.
Manager's being told that he's got to round up his slaves, transport them to the nearest town, accommodate them in a hotel, and then prepare himself to actually pay them. He's saying, I can't afford it.
But what of the owner? It turns out he's in Belém, 1,000 miles away, where he runs a restaurant. He's known as Itzhak, and tells PC on a satellite phone that he knows nothing, that he just hired the manager to do a job and wasn't responsible for who got paid what. His excuses don't wash.
PC's just told this guy Itzhak, the owner of the land, that it doesn't matter whining about whether or not he actually contracted the job to somebody else and it's the other guy's fault for having slaves. He's saying, well, whatever happens, you're responsible, you've got to pay. If you pay in 2 days or 3 days or 3 years, you're going to pay.
These slaves were freed from their debts and returned to their camps to wait for months of back pay. But many seem to see slavery as an occupational hazard.
Now, PC has rescued you from another farm where you were made a slave before. How come you find yourself back in the same position?
Lá no Caru. É porque eu trabalho numa, trabalho noutra, trabalho numa, trabalho noutra.
People like this are absolutely easy to exploit because once they've left home in search of a fortune, they can't go back until they bring a fortune with them. They're embarrassed, they're humiliated, and they've got nothing to go home with. And pretty soon they lose all connection with their families, their friends, their hometown, and they become perpetual drifters, moving from job to job. Sometimes they get paid, sometimes they don't. And that's how the Amazon is being cleared.
The rainforest, which serves as the lungs of the world, is being choked on its own smoke. Future generations might wonder at why, to raise beef for cheap burgers, we used slaves to flatten the Amazon.
Are terminally ill patients being given enough pain control? Dispatches has a shocking report this Monday at 8. Coming up next, it's Channel 4 News and Sport.